This is the Talkin Bout The Hoosiers podcast, presented by thehoosier.com. Hey, before we jump into this episode of the Talkin Bout The Hoosiers podcast, make sure you are subscribed to the Hoosier on 3 on YouTube for all the IU content you could need, including press conferences, highlights, recruiting updates, the Hoosier tailgate, and of course, the Talkin Bout The Hoosiers podcast. Also, go follow Talkin Bout The Hoosiers on Spotify. We really appreciate it and hope you enjoy this episode of the Talkin Bout The Hoosiers podcast.
Hey, what's going on, Hoosier Nation? Hey, real quickly before we get started here with this video, make sure you go over to thehoosier.com and join for just $1 in your first week. With that, you get a free year subscription to theathletic.com, where you can also check out all of their content as well. Come over to thehoosier.com, join the best IU community there is out there. We'd love to have you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Talking About the Hoosiers podcast, now presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. I'm joined by Zach Browning. I'm Drew Rosenberg. Big show today with Indiana heading into a massive Week 4 tilt against Illinois. Before we jump into all that stuff, Zach, how are you doing? It's been a little bit since we jumped on a pod.
I'm doing good, Drew. I'm doing good. Feeling ready for Big Ten football to get underway. How are you doing?
I'm good. I mean, same boat. It's, playing. We're going to talk about Indiana State, Kennesaw State, those two games in just a second, but it's a different feel in Week 4 than it is, heading into those games for sure. But Zach, let's just jump right in. Indiana State, last time we talked, they were heading into Kennesaw State. We had questions about the big play. Kennesaw State, we saw, the Hoosiers struggle with that. And then against Indiana State, completely shut down that offense. Zach, I guess some takeaways you had from those, Week 2 and Week 3 games.
Yeah, the non-conference, it always kind of felt like a prelude, like a preseason, for lack of a better way to put it, for Indiana. I mean, everybody knew they probably weren't going to say that they're looking ahead, but Indiana knew that they had number 9 now, Illinois, coming into Bloomington in Week 4 to open up Big Ten play. But what Kirk Cignetti's focus was, and he told us this pretty much every week throughout the non-conference slate, is that he's had to coach this team a little bit harder than he has other teams in years past, just because of the fact that there's a handful of transfers that have come over from what he described as not winning programs, 500 programs, under 500 programs that don't necessarily know how to win. That is a skill. Knowing how to win and how to kind of handle yourself is a skill. But Kirk Cignetti said he's had to coach this team harder and that he needed to see some maturity from his group. Kennesaw State, Indiana State, even back to Old Dominion, the final score, the result, win or lose, was that really ever in question? Not really. It was more so of just how Indiana looked in those games and how they won. And I think especially with Kennesaw State and especially with Indiana State, Kirk Cignetti, and he said at postgame after the Indiana State game, that he did see some progress on the maturity front. There wasn't smiling and laughing and joking around in the fourth quarter, no matter the score lines of those games late in those contests. And I think that's what Kirk Cignetti wanted to see. You build those habits, you build those types of habits in the early parts of seasons, and that's what carries you into conference play when the games get much harder than they were in the non-conference portion. So I think the biggest takeaway from non-con play for IU is the fact that this team is ready. They made it through unscathed, obviously, but they've made a lot of progress. They've grown together a lot as a team, not only just Fernando Mendoza, comfortability in the pocket and all the X's and O's types of stuff, but just from a maturity standpoint and an everyone being on the same page kind of standpoint. That's what stood out to me so far.
Yeah, I mean, you use the word ready, and I think that's a great word to use because you head into last week, Indiana State, really easy for that team to look ahead and say, hey, you know what, we have an FCS opponent coming in. Their quarterback's out, start looking ahead to Illinois, and none of that happened whatsoever. Indiana came out hot. They threw the first, second, third, and fourth punch in that game. It wasn't ever in doubt. And yeah, you expect that type of performance against an FCS team when you're, as good as Indiana wants to be. But at the same time, it's so easy. We see it all the time in the first quarter, second quarter, these teams hang around with the big guys. And that's what Indiana wants to be. They want to be one of the top dogs in the conference. And putting these teams away early, that's a sign of, being a top dog. But again, you mentioned it. It feels like preseason. Yeah, Indiana's 3-0, and those 3 wins are awesome. It's great. It's great to start 3-0, but the season really starts Week 4. We kind of talked about it. We circled this game. I think you and I probably said it 100 times at this point. Illinois was like the biggest game of the season. And, it's finally here. And it almost feels like the season's really starting this week.
Yeah, you're exactly right. This is when the games, again, the first 3 games of the year, they count. They're 3-0. They count towards your record. It's obviously not technically preseason, but the result, the scoreline, those are never in doubt, whether Indiana was going to win or lose. So the season starts now, and it starts off with a bang, too, because as Jake Butt put it the other day, this is a mock play-in game. This is essentially a playoff game for Indiana and Illinois. Both of these two teams, I wouldn't say it's a must-win game, but it's as close to a must-win game as you can have in Week 4 in September of the college football season. Because without a win in this game on Saturday for both of these two teams, the path to that 12-team college football playoff becomes exponentially more difficult for Indiana and for Illinois both. So that's why this game is so important. This game, it's just kind of weird. You have not – when's the last time we had an IU-Illinois game before – October that meant something as much as this game does? It's kind of weird to think about, but you're exactly right. This is when the season starts. Indiana, the first 3 games of the season, the non-conference games, were to get them ready for this game specifically, and we'll see how ready this team is for conference play on Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, you said, when's the last time Indiana, Illinois had an early season game this important? I'll take it one step further. When's the last time Indiana and Illinois ever had a game this important in the season period? I mean, this I can't go back to history. It's the 75th matchup between the two in their history, but this has to be, at least top 3 of biggest matchups in the history of both of their programs playing each other. And it's, when you look at both teams, I think, we can just start with the quarterback play. I don't know if you've looked at Luke Altmaier versus Fernando Mendoza's numbers. It's insane how similar they are. I think they have 708 passing yards for Mendoza. I think Altmaier has 709. Mendoza's completion percentage is like 72.4. Altmaier's is 71.8. Altmaier has 8 passing touchdowns, no interceptions. Mendoza has 9 and no interceptions. Like 2 veteran quarterbacks, both in their 3rd years as starters. It's easy to, focus on them. And I think we should, because I think those two are going to, they're going to have their hands all over this game. And whichever one of them can, get into a rhythm, get comfortable early, it's going to put their team in a really good spot.
Yeah, before I get into even the quarterbacks, just to continue the similarities between both of these two teams, I mean, Kirk Snetti said it himself. I don't remember the exact quote off the top of my head, but it was something along the lines of, they're similar to us because us being Indiana, Kirk Snetti saying this, they're similar to us because of how they have a good, solid core of returning guys, some veterans sprinkled in that were transfers in kind of pieces and places of need and positions of need. But that's not where the similarities stop. I mean, we've talked about the highly regarded quarterbacks, Luke Altmaier transferring in a while ago, Fernando Mendoza. This offseason, both teams have 2 of the top edge rushers, perhaps in the entire country. Both teams are led by coaches who are entertaining when they get in front of microphones, to say the least. Both coaches have won plenty of postseason awards and coaching awards throughout their time as college coaches. And you look at the ESPN analytics, I think it's number 13 in the FPI. I think it's 13 Illinois and 16 Indiana. These two are so incredibly tightly contested. And I think you're right. It does start with the quarterbacks. It does start with Fernando Mendoza for IU and Luke Altmaier for Illinois. And they're kind of different in a sense. Luke Altmaier, you know what you're going to get from him. This is his 3rd year starting at Illinois. He's kind of a steady presence. He's not necessarily going to use his legs too much. He's not going to scramble and kind of create stuff with his legs, but he's going to be accurate. He's going to do what he is expected to do. He may not make any super flashy plays where like, wow, that was an NFL throw, but Luke Altmaier is one of the top quarterbacks in the Big Ten. Then you look at Fernando Mendoza. He's maybe a little bit more volatile. The floor might be a little bit lower for Fernando Mendoza on a game-to-game basis, but the ceiling also might be higher. There's probably going to be some throws in this game where maybe Fernando Mendoza misses a guy over the middle that could have been caught for a first down and moved the chains. Then there's also going to be throws that are going to be like, wow, this dude's going to be in the first-round conversation in the NFL draft this upcoming season because he's that type of special talent. Mendoza also has a little bit more mobility than Altmaier, but these two quarterbacks, it's an opportunity for each of them. Both of them want to play at the next level, want to go into the NFL perhaps as soon as this year. It's an opportunity not only for them to prove themselves in front of the college football world, but it's an opportunity to have both of these teams prove themselves that maybe not a super strong non-conference schedule, but we are the real deal. We are legit, and we do deserve at the end of the season to be in that 12-team college football playoff.
Yeah, and I think both quarterbacks also have a really good opportunity against two defenses who are a little unproven, especially on the back end. You look, Illinois, they played Duke. Duke at the time, everyone was like, "Oh, it's a really good non-conference team." That Duke team is not very good. They're 1-2, just lost to Tulane. But I'm blanking on their quarterback's name. But Illinois gave up over 350 passing yards in that game. That there is going to be opportunities for Fernando to push the ball downfield and attack this Illinois defense, and vice versa for Luke Altmaier. Kurt Signetti has not been shy about his displeasure with the play of the back end of the defense, especially with safeties. He, has not been happy. Byron Baldwin Jr., who has been day-to-day for 3 weeks now, his status is, still up in the air. I don't know how you can be day-to-day for 3 weeks. I'm assuming he's going to play if he was day-to-day in week 1, but, we'll see. It's, Altmaier is going to have the opportunity. Like, this game could easily end up being a shootout, and I wouldn't be surprised. But on the other end, it's one of those games, like, these teams, it depends how they want to go at it. Indiana last year, we saw them, play Ohio State, Notre Dame, like these good teams, and get killed. They got dominated in the trenches. And Signetti might say, "Hey, we want to run the ball like they've been." They're averaging 300 rushing yards a game through the first 3 weeks. Yes, against lesser opponents, but still, last year too, Indiana wanted to run the football even with Curtis Rourke. They want to run the football again. And I think we should touch on the Lee Beebe injury because yes, it's the I guess second or third running back, but Lee Beebe was like the change of pace back on that team, on this roster. And I think the loss is going to be a little bigger than people, may or may not have realized.
It's interesting, Drew. The loss, I personally think that Kobe Martin will at some point in his Indiana career be really, really talented and be a lead type of back. He's just a redshirt sophomore, so you can't expect too much out of him in this kind of number 3 running back role. I think perhaps where we'll see the biggest impact of no Lee Beebe for Indiana is just him being able to spell the other 2 backs. I know Kurt Signetti said that they're going to rely on Kobe Martin to be that number 3 back, but let's face it, he's probably not going to get the same quantity of carries as Lee Beebe. So because of that, you're subsequently asking more out of Roman Hemby and Kaelon Black. So how do they hold up over the course of a 4-quarter game when they're asked to do a little bit more than they have been so far this season? How do they hold up over the course of the entire season when they're asked to carry slightly more workload with no Lee Beebe and Kobe Martin not carrying as much of an RB3 role and more so just kind of an every now and then get a carry guy? So I think that's where we might see the biggest impact. It's not even necessarily Kobe Martin's ability to run the ball versus Lee Beebe's ability to run the ball. It's just the fact that you're now going to see a higher workload for Roman Hemby, for Kaelon Black, and I think we'll see if that affects them when you're late in the game and maybe need to run some clock and need to pound the ball down the other team's throat. Does Indiana have that same capability? We'll see. Only time will tell.
Yeah, and I mean, you kind of jumped on it without really saying it. The offensive line, it's, last year I kind of touched on it a little bit. Indiana got dominated against Notre Dame in the trenches. They got dominated against Ohio State in the trenches. And Indiana made a really concerted effort this offseason. Kurt Signetti talked about it. He wanted to get better up front. You added Pat Coogan, who was a starter on that Notre Dame team that went to the national championship. You bring back Benson. You bring in Mikalski, who started because Benson had that suspension for the first half, weird situation. But Indiana put a lot into getting better up front in the line of scrimmage. And this is going to be a test. I mean, you mentioned Illinois having one of the best pass rushers in the country, Gabe Jacas, or in the Big Ten at least. But how does Indiana hold up front? Are they able to protect Fernando Mendoza? Because we saw last year Mendoza played behind one of the worst lines in the country, and he was still pretty good. But having a really good line in front of him is just going to make him that much more dangerous.
And you bring up a good point there, Drew, and it's not just how well this offensive line can protect Fernando Mendoza. It's how willing Fernando Mendoza is to be protected. We saw it in game 1, and we saw it last year at Cal. Mendoza was quick to lead the pocket. He knew he didn't have much time last year at Cal, so he was quick to lead the pocket and quick to kind of evacuate that kind of area. We saw it a little bit in game 1 against ODU, where he maybe wasn't super trusting, wasn't super sure of the offensive line just because he spent the last season at Cal dealing with an offensive line that let him get sacked more than 40 times. So, but in weeks 2, weeks 3, he's looked more and more comfortable, not only staying in that pocket, but stepping up in the pocket, delivering that strike across the field, and then when he needs to escape the pocket. But again, this will be the most talented defensive line that Indiana has faced all season long, and could be one of the more talented defensive lines Indiana does face all season long when it's all said and done. But one thing that stands out about this line is no matter the competition, most teams have been playing quote unquote cupcakes, quote unquote non good teams, lesser opponents in non-conference. But even despite that, Indiana, according to Pro Football Focus, has one of the best pass blocking offensive lines in the entire country. Now, the run blocking grades don't make a ton of sense to me because Indiana's run blocking grades, they're good, but they're not at that elite level. But Indiana still run the ball for 300 plus yards the first 3 weeks. So that's besides the point. But this is, on paper, one of the best pass blocking offensive lines in the entire country. They did get better, and this is a point where Indiana wants the offensive line to be a strength. We'll see just how strong it is against the Illini.
Yeah, I mean, Illinois, just going on the other side of that, the run game. Illinois' run defense through 3 weeks has been awesome. I think 74 yards per game, allowed 2.6 rushing yards per carry, and they've yet to allow a rushing score. And, vice versa. That was what Indiana looked like last year. Indiana was one of the best teams at stopping the run. This year, it's not really been the case. 4 yards per carry, 115 rushing yards per game. These cupcake games, as we're kind of calling them, these teams have been able to run the football against Indiana. And I think Illinois, Brett Bielema, he's an NFL guy. A lot of experience in the NFL. I know he's coached at the college level. It's his third stint, I want to say, at the college level. But I expect them to try to run the ball and get that part of the game going and then try to get Luke Altmaier going. I think that's going to be a key for them. So how does Aiden Fisher, how does Elijah Hardy, how does the front four hold up for Indiana on the other side?
And I think this is where Indiana still has a slight advantage, if you ask me, just because if we think about what gave Indiana trouble against ODU and against Kennesaw State, it was funky offense, up-tempo, weird pushing everybody to the boundary, quarterbacks that can run. Indiana's not going to see that against Illinois. Illinois is not going to stack 4 receivers all the way to the boundary on the far side of the field and make the defense spread out. They're not going to spread you out. They're not going to really play up-tempo where they're snapping the ball every 10, 15 seconds. Luke Altmaier has negative rushing yards on the year because he's been sacked, so he's not a threat to use his legs. So I think that's where Indiana has the advantage. In the run game, I think it allows Aiden Fisher to get everybody set. Yeah. I think it allows the safeties to kind of analyze, come down and help Lou Moore, Amari Farrell. I think everybody will be able to be in their run fits, and I think it will look like more of an Indiana defense from last year that was so good against the run, not having to deal with that up-tempo style of offense. Then passing the ball, I think this is something that isn't being talked about enough, but probably should be. The fact that Luke Altmaier isn't super mobile. Yes, he can evade the pocket. Yes, he can make guys miss, but he's not Colton Joseph. He's not Dexter Williams or Amari Odom. He's not as fast. He's not as athletic as those guys. He's not going to be as much of a threat to run as those guys. And it's a real thing. If you're Mikhail Kamara, if you're Stephen Daly or Cullen White coming off the edge, and you have to worry about a guy escaping the pocket, you have to stay strict to your kind of pass rush. You can't make a move inside and allow that outside opportunity wide open for the quarterback to scramble. But against Luke Altmaier, they don't really have to worry about that. You can kind of rush. You can be creative. You can be a little bit more creative with your rush patterns, with the stunts, with the wraps, with the twists and everything like that. You don't have to be as concerned about keeping the quarterback contained within the pocket because this quarterback, Luke Altmaier, isn't as much of a threat to run as Indiana's seen so far this season. And I think that will help Indiana's pass rush tremendously, much more so than anything else that could potentially improve the pass rush that we've seen from the past couple of weeks. So I think that's where Indiana might have an advantage, and it's not being super talked about in my eyes.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, Indiana, we've seen it. They've struggled a little bit containing quarterbacks in the pocket. And, being able to be aggressive in the pass rush, and being overly aggressive, not really having to worry about a full contain when you're on the outside. Because Altmaier, as you said, he's not someone that's going to kill you for, 50, 60 rushing yards in the game. If Altmaier is carrying the ball a ton and he's being forced to, roll out and try to beat you with his feet, that's a winning formula for Indiana. But speaking of winning formula, we're going to jump into our keys to victory in just a second after a quick message from our sponsors.
Huddle up, football fans. Tailgate season is here, and nobody gets you ready for game day like Academy Sports and Outdoors. Swing by your local Academy store or shop online at academy.com to find everything you need, from grills to jerseys and more. Be a watch party legend with gear from top brands like Nike and Under Armour, all at unbeatable prices every day. With 8 Academy stores across Indiana, including our Bloomington location, fun can't lose, and neither can you. Gear up today at Academy Sports and Outdoors.
We'll be right back, but first we have to talk to you guys about Rhoback Activewear. There's only one way to describe Rhoback: best fit, best feel. For those who aren't familiar with Rhoback, they're completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. Rhoback has released so many items within their new licensed game day collection, and it's our favorite. With novel polo designs and clean hoodie and Q-zip designs from some of your favorite schools, including the Indiana Hoosiers, it's definitely worth checking out. Nobody else in the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality of activewear. Rhoback's everyday shorts or their Delta Performance pants are the perfect pairing as well. They're both super comfortable, have an elastic waistband, and great fabric that is made to have the appearance of a nice short look, but the comfort for a day on the move. Rhoback has also been proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with multiple college football stars, past and present, and are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes across the country. Use the code IND20 on Rhoback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers throughout the end of the week. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with the code IND20. Now back to the rest of this episode of the Talking About the Hoosiers podcast. All right, Zach, I'm going to start with you. Your key to victory, or some keys to victory. What do you want to see Indiana do if they're going to win this game on Saturday night?
I think it starts with establishing yourself up front and being the dominant team at the line of scrimmage, because that's who's going to win this game. Whether it's Illinois, whether it's Indiana, whoever wins the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball is going to win this game. If Indiana is unable to run the football and has to throw the ball 40, 50 times, it's not a recipe for success. On the flip side, if Indiana is able to limit what the ground game for the Illini can do and put pressure on Luke Altmaier and get him to play off balance and play outside of the pocket, that will help Indiana win the football game. So first and foremost, it starts, and it pretty much is the key for every Big Ten game and every college football game. You have to win at the line of scrimmage. But I think also defensively, another part of that is cutting down on the explosive plays. That's kind of been Indiana's Achilles heel so far this season. Saw it against ODU. Colton Joseph had those 275-plus yard runs. Saw it against Kennesaw State when Indiana gave up plays of 20 or more yards more frequently than they did in any single game last season. So Indiana has to be able to limit those explosive plays. You can't consistently get gashed for 20-plus yards. Luke Altmaier will get into a groove, get into a rhythm, and then that spells trouble for Indiana. So you have to win the line of scrimmage and subsequently not allow those explosive plays. Keep them to 4, 5, 6 yards per play at most if you're Indiana to have a chance in this one.
Yeah, and I'm also looking at a matchup on Indiana's defensive side. How does D'Angelo Pons match up against Hank Beatty? He is the guy for Luke Altmaier. Way more targets, way more catches than everyone else on that roster. He is the guy Luke Altmaier is looking for, and he's, a big key to their passing game. Altmaier is, able to get it to multiple guys, and it's not like just Beatty, but if D'Angelo Pons is able to take Beatty out of the game like we've seen Pons do with other, top wide receivers, it's going to go such a long way in, helping the rest of the defense, especially for his secondary that's already kind of shorthanded and has been, the topic of, hey, they need to play better. And having a guy like Pons, he takes so much pressure off the safeties on the back end as they say, hey, we can kind of shift over and help these other guys. So I think that's going to be really important. But then the turnover battle, Illinois is yet to turn the football over this season. Indiana has just one turnover. Last year, it was such a key forcing turnovers for Indiana. Illinois, I want to say they were averaging 2 turnovers forced per game. And I think just 1 interception on the year. So what quarterback's going to break first? Which QB is going to throw their first interception on Saturday, if either? And, who's going to protect the football? Because, we've seen how quickly you can dominate a game and lose if you turn the football over. And that's been, kind of a staple of Cignetti. It's take care of the football, force turnovers on the other end of the field. And Indiana needs to do that if they're going to beat Illinois.
Yeah, just ask Duke. That was a one-possession game at halftime, and then Darian Mensah, the Duke quarterback, decided to consistently give the ball to Illinois like every other possession. They turned it over like 3 or 4 times. Duke did in that game against Illinois earlier this year. But I got some numbers to back up your point on the turnover margin, Drew.
Mhm.
Illinois is 10-0 when they commit 1 or fewer turnovers over the last 2 seasons. Additionally, they're 10-1 over the last 2 seasons when forcing at least 1 turnover. So if you beat Illinois in the turnover margin, you have a chance to win. If you lose the margin of the turnover margin against Illinois, as history the last 2 seasons would tell you, Illinois is 20-1 when winning that turnover margin. So it's pretty evident right there. You're going to have to be key. And I like that you bring up D'Angelo Pons because this is a matchup. It's not like that Washington game last year when, remember, if we think back to the Washington game, people were all like, oh, can D'Angelo Pons do it against these guys that are 6'4", 6'5", 200-plus pounds? Hank Beatty's not that. He's 5'11", 185 listed on the Illinois website. So he's not a big guy. And we know D'Angelo Pons, no matter who it is going to be as physical, if not more physical, than that guy. And Drew, until D'Angelo Pons proves he can't guard somebody, because I still haven't seen it. So until somebody proves that D'Angelo Pons can't guard them, you have to rock with D'Angelo Pons. You have to trust, if you're Bryant Haynes, if you're that Indiana defense, you have to trust that he's going to go out there and lock down the other team's number 1 wide receiver.
And what a luxury that is to have if you're Bryant Haynes. I mean, you talk about how important it is to have a lockdown corner, but having a true lockdown corner, someone you can say, hey, give him a number, he's good, and just follow him around the entire game. Like having someone like Pons, it opens so much up for the defenses. Haynes can be aggressive in places. He can play more man. He can help other places. And it's allowed Bryant Haynes to, do a lot on that end of the field and be aggressive. And Indiana has been aggressive. I think a little bit too. They've been holding back a little bit through these first 3 weeks. We kind of talked about that a little bit in the past. How much is Indiana going to show? We haven't really seen them showing much other than that, fourth quarter flicker against Old Dominion. But, what is Kurt Signetti, Mike Shanahan, and Brian Haynes, what do they have up their sleeve that they've kind of been saving, haven't put on film yet that they've been waiting for this game, And same thing with Brett Bielema. I'm sure he has some stuff up his sleeve as well. This is, I said it earlier, probably the biggest matchup between these two schools in the history of their program. But it's such a fun matchup because it's also, you have talented quarterbacks, talented coaches. It's, there's talent all over the field, mix of veterans and transfers. And it's who's going to step up. And, these are the games where, legends are kind of made. We saw it last year, in these big games, the guys step up, whether, going to Ohio State, like Jeremiah Smith on, a third down against Notre Dame, the national championship as a freshman. He's going to, no matter what he does the rest of his college career, he's going to live as kind of a legend because of that play and hit that freshman season. And, Indiana, someone steps up. If it's an Omar Cooper Jr., Elijah Surratt, maybe it's a Holden States. If someone steps up, they have a chance to establish himself as a guy moving forward this season, but, as someone that this program is going to remember.
And that's the thing. You have to have all 11 guys on the field doing their job every single play in and play out. And it wasn't that long ago, Drew, if you remember back, I think it was 3 years ago in 2022, the last time these two teams played in Bloomington under the lights, Connor Bazelak led a game-winning drive with like 2 minutes to go to win that game and beat Illinois. So it's one of those things where these two teams, as of late, as of recently, have had a knack for playing close games. Obviously, the game 2 years ago in 2023 went into overtime in Champaign, and then even the year before that in 2022, Bazelak with that game-winning drive. So if recent history is any indication, this will be a close game. It'll come down to it late, and it'll come down to which team stars. The best players shine in the biggest moments, no matter the stage. It'll be about which team's best players can make the plays they need to late down the stretch.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that game 2 years ago at in Urbana-Champaign. I mean, that was one of the most fun games I've ever watched as, in an Indiana loss, 48-45. Donovan McCulley, the one-handed touchdown, 5 touchdowns total from Sorsby. And it was like in that game, Indiana was like, oh, maybe, Tom Allen can save this job with a bull run, and then, kind of collapsed at the end in overtime. But we're going to jump into our predictions in just a second. But first, we have a quick message from our sponsor, BetMGM. As you all probably know by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use the bonus code ON3, and you'll get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code ON3. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use the bonus code ON3 when you sign up. Make this college football season one for the history books. Make it legendary. All right, Zach, now it's time for our predictions for this week, presented by BetMGM. The line BetMGM currently has is Indiana at 5.5 points. We're recording this Wednesday, so this could easily change. It opened at 3. I see, so it's already moved a ton in the Hoosiers' favor, which is kind of funny to me because, what I've seen, a lot of people are on Illinois. A lot of the so-called experts have Illinois winning this football game. Yet the line has moved 2.5 points already, which makes me think, what does Vegas know and what's Indiana going to do? So, Zach, what's, I guess, your prediction for this game?
I'll start out with the score. I think Indiana wins this game. I think it's close throughout, and I think Indiana wins 31-20. I think this is a little bit more of a defensive game than we saw the last time these two teams met. Obviously, that one was 48-45. But I think it's just, again, not too many people are talking about it enough. I think the fact that Luke Altmaier isn't super mobile, I think that plays so much into the advantage of Indiana. The fact that they can draw up kind of exotic pressures. Bryant Haynes, he likes to be aggressive. He wants his guys and his players to be aggressive. He wants them to be sound, but he wants them to be aggressive. He wants them to take chances. And against a guy that isn't necessarily a super big threat to beat you with his legs, you're allowed a little bit more leeway to be that much more aggressive and that much more exotic in your play calling. And I think that could very well be the difference. Obviously, got to win the line of scrimmage. I think Indiana does on both sides of the ball. I think they win 31-20 at home under the lights, a readout. It's going to be a fantastic atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, under the lights, the readout. I think the atmosphere is going to play a huge part. We saw last year, Indiana went to 2 really tough atmospheres and they struggled, I mean, Mike Kadick has even talked about going into Ohio State, Notre Dame, hearing the quarterback, even though the quarterback's 2 feet away from you, how difficult it is. And I think the fans are going to play a huge part. When's the last time? We keep saying when's the last time for the Indiana because it's been so long since they've hosted a night game with that mattered this much. It's going to be a sellout. It's going to be a readout. The Hoosier fans are going to be loud, and I think it's going to play such a factor in this game. I think we've seen when the crowd gets going, these players, they feed off it. Kurt Cignetti, he begged fans to stay, and it's slowly but surely, breaking the habits of leave at halftime. But it's a new Indiana football. And I think the Hoosiers win this game. I think these teams are really equally matched. I think if it was, in Illinois, it'd be a tougher game. But I think 31-27 is kind of what I've been saying for a bit. I keep going back and forth. But I do think these quarterbacks are going to put up some points. And I think in the end, I think the difference is going to be the Hoosiers making, a big turnover at some point in the game, whether it's, a red zone flip for Illinois, or maybe it's a pick 6 or something from D'Angelo Ponce. But I think that's going to kind of be what ends up determining the outcome of this game.
Yeah, you make a good point. I think if this game was being played at the Memorial Stadium in Illinois, I think I'd be picking Illinois to win this football game. I think this is just a luxury Indiana has, how the schedule folded, how Indiana has this game at home, and I think that might be the deciding factor. A big third down late in the game, it's going to be loud in there if Illinois has the football, and vice versa. If Indiana has the football, it's not going to be loud in there. People are going to be quiet, let that offense work. So I think that will probably be the difference in this game is the crowd, where it's being played. You bring up a good point there.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be electric. You're going to be there. We're going to have full coverage on the Hoosier website and Hoosier on 3 Twitter account. And, there's going to be a ton of guys there. And if you haven't seen the full list of all the, high school recruits who are going to be in attendance, we got that on the Hoosier website as well. If you haven't done so already, make sure you're following the Hoosier on 3 on X/Twitter. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the Hoosier for premium content, including exclusive interviews, scouting reports, and access to the Hoosier Hangout message board where guys like Joe Tipton, Jamie Shaw, they're posting all their recruiting info. And if you haven't done so, subscribe to the Hoosier on 3 on YouTube. Make sure you're following Talking About the Hoosiers on Spotify and hit that like button. It means so much to us. We really appreciate it. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Talking About the Hoosiers podcast. We'll be back.